It's taken me a little while to see that you've been by my side this whole time with me. You've been with me.
The book of Job is not only the historical account of a godly man who must hold to his faith during an extreme trial. It's also great literary art. In other words, the historical record is told in a very artful way. Perhaps it will surprise you that the book of Job follows the fairly modern template of a narrative plot design. Basic plot design starts with an inciting incident. The incident's like the spark that gets a fire started. The fire, I'm referring to the tension in the story, becomes more and more intense as the story proceeds. This buildup of tension will take up the largest portion of the story. When the tension is almost too much to bear, we finally reach a climax. According to basic plot design, we will then hear the relatively short resolution to the conflict. Figuratively speaking, the fire gets put out. Literally, we get our questions answered and the tension is released. Let's identify all these parts and pieces to basic plot of the book in the book of Job. The inciting incident is in chapters 1 and 2 when crime, disaster, and sickness bring a great trial on a man that God has thus far only blessed. Then most of the book adds more and more tension as Job and his friends argue from chapter 3 all the way to chapter 37. We reach the climax, the point of greatest tension in the entire story, when the Lord speaks to Job in a whirlwind. Finally, in the last chapter of the book, we get the relatively brief but very important resolution to Job's trial. We can run through Job's story again and find all the elements of an even more detailed model for plot design. This more detailed model is called the three-act structure. Act 1 is the setup act, which includes the inciting incident. Act 2 is the confrontation act when tension builds, and Act 3 is the resolution act when tension is released. Let me show you how the book of Job fits this model in detail. In Act 1, the setup act, we learn background details about Job. He's from a place called Uz. He's an upright man, a family man, and rich. We also learn in the setup act how a heavenly court, which includes the adversary Satan, is working behind the scenes to give Job his terrible trial. The setup act also contains the inciting incident of the entire trial. Job's family, his riches, and his health are destroyed. Job's initial reaction? Quote, "Shall we accept good from God and not trouble?" Unquote. But each of the three acts has its own climax, sort of a climax within the greater climax. The climax of Act 1, the setup act, is when Job wishes that the day of his birth never took place. Act 2 is the confrontation, when the story tension really builds. We hear Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar trade insults with Job. It becomes a very heated and deeply felt argument, almost like a court trial on top of Job's suffering. The book of Job even fits the three-act model for basic plot design by including a so-called big twist. The surprise comes when a young man, Elihu, enters the picture to defend God against the four ignorant arguers. When Elihu finishes, we get the climax of the whole story. God speaks to Job in a whirlwind. God is majestic and powerful, and the tension is almost unbearable. The only thing left in the three-act structure is the resolution, a brief section of the story when the tension is released. It includes all of chapter 42, including Job's response to God. I despise myself and repent in dust and ashes. Job prays, his riches are restored, and he again has a large and happy family. It's more than the testimony of a man whose faith is tested to the extreme. It's also the finishing touch on a high achievement in literary art.